The wind howled like a
There
wounded
you
animal
go,
across the
dear.
Montana plains.
Thanks, that smells great.
Minus 35
How
degrees
is it?
Celsius.
Perfect.
The kind of cold
I
that
can't
turned
believe
breath
he's
to
really
ice
gone.
crystals before
I
they
know,
hit the
dear. He
ground.
loved you very
The kind
much.
of
I
cold
miss
that
him.
He's
killed.
always with us.
Margaret
Yeah,
Callahan
we
stood
did.
in the
Guys, look
doorway of
good.
her ranch house, one weathered hand gripping the frame, the other clutching a flashlight that cut a weak beam through the swirling white chaos. 81 years old, 12 years a widow, 47 winters in this unforgiving land. She should have stayed inside. But something in the darkness called to her. A sound, a presence, something wrong in the rhythm of the storm. Probably just a branch, she muttered to herself, her voice lost in the wind's fury. But Margaret Callahan hadn't survived 8 decades by ignoring her instincts. She pulled on Thad's old military parka. Still smelled like him after all these years. Motor oil and pine and the faint trace of the cigars he used to smoke on the porch when he thought she wasn't looking. She laced up her boots, the same ones she'd worn the day she'd pulled a calf from a frozen creek. The same ones she'd worn to Thad's funeral. The Winchester 12 gauge came off the rack by the door. Not for protection, for comfort. The weight of it in her hands reminded her she wasn't helpless, wasn't fragile, wasn't the frail old woman the folks in town seemed to think she'd become. The door fought her as she pushed it open. The wind tried to slam it back, but Maggie was stronger. Always had been. She stepped out into the blizzard and the cold hit her like a fist to the chest. Her flashlight beam danced across the snow-covered yard. The barn stood dark and solid against the white. The truck sat buried to its wheel wells. Everything looked wrong. Everything looked the same. Then she saw it, a track in the snow. Recent. Something heavy had moved through here. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. Her finger found the Winchester's safety. Clicked it off. She followed the track. 20 yards. 50. The wind screamed at her to turn back, but Maggie Callahan had never been good at listening to warnings. The track led to the edge of her property where the land dropped away into a shallow gully. That's when she heard it, not the wind. Something else. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. A motorcycle engine. Dying. And then nothing. Maggie's heart hammered in her chest. She moved faster now, the snow fighting every step. The flashlight beam swept left, then right. That's when she saw the blood. Dark red against pristine white. A trail of it leading down into the gully. Lord help me, she whispered. She half ran, half slid down the embankment. The flashlight found twisted metal first. A Harley-Davidson, big, black, lying on its side like a fallen titan. The engine still ticked as it cooled each sound a countdown to frozen silence. Then the beam found him. A man, face down in the snow. One leg twisted at an angle that made Maggie's stomach turn. Blood matted the back of his head, dark and wet and freezing fast. She knelt beside him, her knees protesting, her hands already numb despite her gloves. She reached for his neck, feeling for a pulse. For a moment, nothing. Then there. Weak. Thready. But there. Sir, can you hear me? No response. She tried to roll him over, but he was big, solid, dead weight. She managed to turn his head enough to see his face. Weathered, scarred, a thick beard crusted with ice. Maybe late 40s. Hard to tell with men who'd lived hard lives. That's when her flashlight caught it, on the back of his leather jacket, stitched in red and white thread that seemed to glow in the beam's light. Hell's Angels. The letters might as well have been written in fire. Maggie's hand froze on his shoulder. Her breath caught in her throat. Hell's Angels. Montana. Summer 1983. Delilah Morrison's laugh had always been too loud for church. That's what Maggie had loved about her. Delilah didn't care what anybody thought. She wore her skirts too short and her lipstick too red, and she danced at the county fair like nobody was watching. They'd been friends since third grade, closer than sisters, shared every secret, every dream, every disappointment. The bikers had come through town on a Tuesday, 20 of them, leather and chrome and engines that rattled windows. They'd stopped at Murphy's Bar on Main Street, started drinking at noon. By nightfall, they were looking for trouble. Delilah had been walking home from her shift at the diner. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong everything. They found her the next morning in the alley behind the hardware store. Broken ribs, shattered jaw, bruises that turned her face into something unrecognizable. She died 3 weeks later. Not from the beating, from the infection that followed, from the piece of her that they'd broken inside that couldn't be fixed. The bikers had left town before sunrise. Nobody ever caught them. Nobody ever even tried very hard. And Margaret Callahan had hated every single one of them ever since. Now kneeling in the snow beside this Hell's Angel, that hatred burned in her chest. She could leave him, should leave him, Let the cold do what it did best. The storm would cover the evidence. By morning, he'd be just another winter casualty, another fool who'd challenged Montana and lost. She started to stand. Then he moved, just barely. His hand twitched. His fingers scraped against the ice. And he spoke. Please. The word came out, broken, desperate. Please, I have to find her. His eyes opened, just slits. But Maggie could see them in the flashlight beam. Blue, clear, filled with something that looked like hope struggling against darkness. My brother, I promised, way before he died. Have to find her. His hand reached out, grasping at nothing, at air, at possibility. Please, ma'am, I promised to Connor. Then his hand fell back to the snow. His eyes closed. His breathing went shallow. Maggie stood there, the wind howling around her, the cold seeping through her coat, through her skin, into her bones. Hell's angels. Delilah's broken face. This man's desperate plea. Her own hand trembled as she reached up to wipe the ice from her eyes. Or maybe it was tears, hard to tell in a blizzard. She thought of Thad, what he would say, what he would do. She thought of Delilah, the friend she'd lost. She thought of Rosalind, the sister she hadn't spoken to in 18 years. The sister she'd been too proud to call, too stubborn to forgive. This man had a brother, a promise, a mission. She had a sister, and nothing but regret. Lord, forgive me, Maggie whispered into the storm. She holstered the flashlight in her belt, grabbed the man under his arms. I can't leave him. The next 20 minutes would be burned into Margaret Callahan's memory forever. She couldn't lift him, not fully. He had to weigh 200 pounds, and most of it was muscle and leather and dead weight. She tried dragging him by his arms, made it 10 feet before her back screamed in protest. The cold was getting worse. The wind was picking up. In another hour, they'd both be dead out here. Think, Maggie, think. Her eyes found the motorcycle, then scanned the area. There, 20 yards away, the old equipment shed. She'd stored the broken door from the barn in there last fall, meaning to fix it, never getting around to it. She half ran, half stumbled to the shed, yanked the door open, found the barn door lying flat. Old oak, solid, heavy as sin, but it would work. She dragged it out of the shed, pulled it through the snow to where the man lay, positioned it next to him. Then came the hard part. She grabbed him under the shoulders again, pulled, heaved. Her boots slipped on the ice. She went down on one knee, got back up, pulled harder. Inch by inch, she rolled him onto the door. His broken leg twisted as he moved. Even unconscious, he groaned, a sound of pure agony that cut through the wind. I'm sorry, Maggie said. I'm so sorry, but I've got to move you. She found rope in the shed, good, strong hemp, the kind that Thad had used for everything. She looped it around the barn door, creating a makeshift harness. Then she put the rope over her shoulder and pulled. The door didn't move. She pulled harder. Her boots dug into the snow, her back arched, her teeth ground together. The door slid, 6 inches, then a foot. Maggie pulled, 81 years old, pulling 200 pounds of unconscious biker through a blizzard, in minus 35-degree weather, at 11:47 at night. Every muscle in her body screamed, her lungs burned. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She pulled, 10 yards, 20. The house lights seemed impossibly far away. She fell, got up, fell again. On the third fall, she stayed down for a moment, gasping, her face pressed against the snow. The cold felt almost warm now. That was bad. That meant hypothermia. That meant giving up would be easy. She looked back at the man on the door. His face was white, lips blue. He wasn't moving. Connor. He'd said his brother's name. Connor. Maggie had a sister named Rosalind. She got up, pulled, 30 yards, 40. Her vision started to blur. Her hands were beyond numb. She couldn't feel her feet anymore. 50 yards. The porch steps appeared in front of her like a miracle. She'd made it. Somehow. Impossibly. But she still had to get him up the steps and through the door. She unhooked the rope, grabbed him under the arms again, pulled him up the first step, the second, the third. Her heart felt like it might explode. Red spots danced at the edges of her vision. Fourth step, fifth, the door. She kicked it open, dragged him across the threshold into blessed warmth. Then Margaret Callahan collapsed beside him on the floor, her chest heaving, her whole body shaking. For a full minute, she just lay there, breathing, alive. Then she forced herself up. There was work to do. Maggie had learned field medicine from Thad. He'd served as a combat medic in the Gulf War before becoming a Marine rifleman. Used to say the medical training saved more lives than the rifle ever could. She'd sewn up Thad's hand when he'd cut it on barbed wire, set her own finger when she'd broken it in the barn door, delivered a breech calf at 2 in the morning with nothing but her hands in prayer. This was different, but the principles were the same. Stop the bleeding, stabilize the injury, prevent shock. She dragged the man and God he was heavy across the floor to the fireplace. The fire had burned down to embers, but it still gave heat. She built it back up, adding logs until the flames roared. Then she started removing his wet clothes. The leather jacket came first. Hell's Angels. The patch stared up at her from the floor like an accusation. She tried not to look at it. Beneath the jacket, a thermal shirt, soaked through. She cut it off with her sewing scissors. His body was a map of veins, scars everywhere, a bullet wound in his left shoulder, what looked like a knife scar across his ribs, burns on his right arm. This was a man who'd lived hard and expected to die harder. She wrapped him in every blanket she owned, then turned her attention to his leg. The right shin was clearly broken. She could see the swelling even through his jeans. She cut the denim away carefully, trying not to jar the injury. The break was bad. Not compound, thank God, but bad enough. The leg was already turning purple. She had splints in the medical kit. Thad had insisted on keeping a full trauma kit in the house. Montana's a long way from help, he'd said. Got to be ready. She braced the leg as best she could, wrapped it tight. Not perfect, but it would hold until she could get him to a hospital. If the roads ever opened, if they both lived that long. The head wound was next. She cleaned it with antiseptic that made the unconscious man flinch. The cut was deep, but not critical. Head wounds always bled like a stuck pig. She butterflied it closed with tape and wrapped his head in gauze. Then she covered him with more blankets and sat back on her heels exhausted. The clock on the mantel read 12:43. Less than an hour since she'd heard the crash. It felt like a lifetime. She looked at the man's face. In the firelight with his eyes closed and his breathing steady, he looked almost peaceful, almost innocent. But the Hell's Angels jacket on the floor told a different story. Maggie stood. Her whole body ached. She was 61 years old when Thad died, and she'd felt ancient. Now at 81, she felt like she'd aged another decade in the last hour. She picked up the jacket, held it at arm's length like it might bite. On the inside, she found a wallet. Leather, worn smooth. She opened it. Montana driver's license. Jacob Reaper Donovan. Age 47, 6'2", 210 pounds. Organ donor. Reaper. What kind of name was Reaper? She kept looking. A photo fell out. 2 young men, identical. Twins, both in army uniforms, both smiling. One had his arm around the other's shoulder. She flipped it over. Written in faded ink, Connor and Jake, Fort Benning, 1995. Brothers forever. Connor, the name he'd said in the snow. Maggie looked at the unconscious man by her fire, looked back at the photo. The man in the photo looked younger, hopeful, unbroken. The man on her floor looked like the world had tried to kill him and only partially failed. She tucked the photo back in the wallet, put the wallet on the table. Then she went to the kitchen and made coffee. Strong and black, the way Thad used to drink it. The radio sat on the counter. She turned it on. Static mostly. Then a voice broke through. Severe blizzard warning remains in effect through Friday. All roads in and out of Billings are closed. Interstate 90 is impassable. Emergency services are suspended until conditions improve. If you are not in a secure location, seek shelter immediately. This is a life-threatening weather event. Friday. That was 3 days away. 3 days trapped in this house with a Hell's Angel. 3 days before she could get him to a hospital. 3 days before she could make him leave. Maggie sat at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. What have I done? She whispered. But deep down she knew. She'd saved a life, even if it was the life of a man wearing the same colors as the monsters who'd killed her best friend. Jake Donovan woke to the smell of coffee and wood smoke. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Not on the road, not in the clubhouse, somewhere warm, somewhere that smelled like home. If he'd ever known what home smelled like. He tried to open his eyes, the light hurt. Firelight, flickering, warm. He tried to move, pain shot through his right leg like lightning. Easy now. A woman's voice, older, firm, the kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. He managed to open his eyes fully, saw wooden beams overhead, a stone fireplace, a woman sitting in a rocking chair 10 feet away watching him, old, maybe 80, White hair pulled back in a bun, face lined with years, but eyes sharp as broken glass. She held a coffee cup in both hands like it was the only thing anchoring her to earth. Where? His voice came out as a croak. His throat felt like sandpaper. My home, the woman said. You crashed outside. It came back in pieces. The storm, the ice, the motorcycle going sideways, the impact, the cold. You saved me, he managed. The woman's expression didn't change. Don't mistake this for friendship. Roads are closed. I couldn't move you anywhere else. When the storm ends, you leave. Jake tried to sit up. The pain in his leg made him gasp. Broken shin, the woman said. Splinted it best I could. You need a hospital. How far to town? 42 miles, roads closed. Radio says storm will last 3 more days. Jake looked around the room, saw his jacket hanging by the door, the Hells Angels patch clearly visible. He looked back at the woman, saw something in her eyes. Not fear, not exactly, something colder, something that looked like hatred barely held in check. You saw the patch, he said. It wasn't a question. I did. And you still saved me. The woman stood, set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. I did what needed doing, doesn't mean I trust you. She walked to the kitchen, came back with a glass of water and 2 pills. Antibiotics, she said, for the head wound. Take them. Jake took the pills, swallowed them dry. His hands shook as he handed back the glass. Thank you, he said. The woman didn't respond, just stood there looking at him like he was a rattlesnake that had crawled into her house. Dangerous, unwelcome, but too injured to kill. What's your name? Jake asked. A pause. Then Margaret Callahan. People call me Mags. Jake Donovan. I know, saw your license. Another pause. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. Mrs. Callahan. Miss, she corrected. I'm a widow. Miss Callahan, I know what you're thinking. The jacket, the patch, I know what it means to you. You don't know anything about me. I know you're afraid. I know you're wondering if you made a mistake saving me. I know you've got a shotgun behind that door, and you're thinking about whether you need to use it. Mags's eyes narrowed. The Winchester's behind the kitchen door, actually. And yes, I'm thinking about it. Jake nodded slowly. Fair enough, but I want you to know something. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just trying to get to Billings. Why? Jake looked at the fire. Saw Connor's face in the flames. Always saw Connor's face when he looked at fire. I'm looking for someone, a woman named Evangeline Rousseau. She helped me and my brother when we were kids. My brother, he died 5 years ago. He wanted to find her, thank her, but he never got the chance, so I'm doing it for him. Mags was quiet for a long moment. That's a nice story, she said finally. Doesn't change what you are. And what am I, a Hell's Angel? I am, Jake said. Have been for 23 years. But that's not all I am. Isn't it? Jake met her eyes, held her gaze. I'm also a man who keeps his promises. A man who's trying to honor his brother's last wish. A man who's grateful to be alive. Thanks to you. Mags turned away, walked to the window, looked out at the storm. You'll sleep in the spare room, she said her back to him. You don't touch my things. You don't go into my bedroom. You don't make me regret this. When the road's clear, you leave. We understand each other. Yes, ma'am. Good. She walked to the hallway, stopped at the door, didn't turn around. There's soup on the stove. Help yourself when you can move. Bathroom's down the hall. Don't bleed on my floor. Then she was gone. Jake lay back down, his head, spinning his leg, throbbing, his whole body aching. But he was alive. An 81-year-old woman had dragged him out of a blizzard and saved his life. An 81-year-old woman who clearly hated everything he represented. An 81-year-old woman who'd saved him anyway. Jake closed his eyes and for the first time in 5 years, said a prayer of thanks. Maggie stood in her bedroom, her back against the closed door, her whole body shaking. Not from cold, not from exhaustion, from fear, from rage, from something she couldn't name. There was a Hell's Angel in her house, in Thad's house, sleeping in the guest room where Rosie used to stay when they were still speaking. She'd pulled him from the snow, dragged him 200 yards, saved his miserable life. Why? Because of a promise to a dead brother. Because of the desperation in his voice. Because she'd heard that same desperation in her own voice every time she thought about calling. Rosie Maggie walked to her dresser. Opened the top drawer. Underneath her nightgowns, she found the box. She hadn't opened it in 9 years. Inside letters, 20 of them, all unopened, all from Rosie. She'd recognize the handwriting every time. had held each letter in her hands, had come so close to opening them. But pride was a powerful thing. Pride and stubbornness and the belief that if Rosie really wanted to apologize, really wanted to make things right, she'd do it in person. So Maggie had put each letter in the box, told herself she'd open them someday. Someday had never come. Now there was a stranger in her house, a dangerous stranger, a stranger who was looking for a woman named Evangeline, a stranger who'd promised his dead brother he'd find her. Maggie thought about Connor, the twin in the photo, the soldier who'd died 5 years ago without completing his mission. She thought about Rosie, the sister she hadn't seen in 18 years, the sister who might be dead for all Maggie knew. She closed the box, put it back in the drawer. Then she walked to her bed, lay down fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Day one morning came gray and bitter. The storm had eased but not stopped. Snow still fell thick and relentless. Maggie woke at 5:30, force of habit. Thad used to say she had an internal alarm clock more reliable than any battery-powered nonsense. She made coffee first, always coffee first. Then she checked on the biker. Jake, she had to think of him by name now, she supposed was still asleep or unconscious. Hard to tell. His breathing was steady. His color was better than last night. The bandage on his head showed no fresh blood. She left him sleeping and went to check the generator. The power had gone out at some point during the night, not unusual in storms like this. That's why Thad had installed the diesel generator. Military surplus, built to run for weeks. Maggie pulled on her parka and boots and headed to the shed. The generator sat silent. She checked the fuel. Full. Checked the connections. All good. She hit the starter. Nothing. She tried again. Nothing. Damn it! She opened the access panel, checked the fuel line, there frozen solid. The diesel had gelled in the cold. She needed to heat it, get it flowing again, but that meant need some help. Maggie spun around. Jake stood in the doorway of the shed, leaning heavily on a crutch he'd apparently fashioned from a broom handle and duct tape. His face was pale. His right leg was splinted and wrapped, but he was upright. "You should be in bed," Maggie said. "Generator's down. You need heat. I can help." "You can barely stand." "I can use my hands. I've been working on engines since I was 12. Maggie wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him to go back inside to stay out of her way, to stop being useful, but she needed the generator running, and pride didn't keep you warm in a Montana blizzard. "Fine," she said, "but if you pass out, I'm leaving you where you fall." Jake smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost kind. "Deal." For the next hour, they worked together in silence. Jake diagnosed the problem, not just the frozen fuel line, but a clogged filter and a loose connection in the starter. Maggie followed his instructions, heated the fuel line with a torch, changed the filter, tightened the connection. Jake's hands shook. His face went from pale to gray. Twice he had to sit down. But he didn't stop, didn't complain. When Maggie hit the starter the fourth time, the generator coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. "There you go," Jake said. He was breathing hard, sweating despite the cold. "You know your engines," Maggie said. "My old man hated bikes, so I learned everything about them. Rebellion through competence, smart." Jake laughed, then winced as the movement jarred his leg. "Come on," Maggie said. "Back inside before you fall over." She helped him to the house. He was heavier than he looked, and she was still exhausted from last night. But they made it. She got him settled by the fire, made him drink water, made him take more antibiotics. Then she made breakfast, eggs and bacon and toast, real food, the kind Thad used to say, "Put meat on your bones." They ate in silence. The wind howled outside. The fire crackled. Finally, Jake spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why did you save me?" "Really?" Maggie set down her fork, looked at the fire, at Thad's photo on the mantel, at the empty chair where Rosie used to sit during Christmas dinners. "Because," she said quietly, "a long time ago I let pride cost me someone I loved, and I'm tired of paying that price." Jake didn't respond, just nodded slowly. They finished eating. Maggie cleared the plates. As she walked to the kitchen, Jake spoke again. "Miss Callahan, yes, for the food, for the help, for saving my life. I'm grateful." Maggie paused in the doorway. "Don't be grateful yet," she said. "Storm's got 2 more days. Lot can happen in 2 days." Day 2. The second day brought worse weather. The temperature dropped to -40. The wind picked up. Snow fell so thick you couldn't see 10 feet. Maggie and Jake settled into an uneasy routine. She made meals. He washed dishes with one leg propped on a chair. She tended the fire. He read books from her shelf, mostly westerns and military histories. They didn't talk much, but they existed in the same space without killing each other, which Maggie supposed was progress. That afternoon, while Jake was napping, Maggie found herself looking at his wallet again. At the photo of the twins, Connor and Jake. She thought about Rosie, about the letters in her drawer. Before she could talk herself out of it, she went to her bedroom, opened the drawer, took out the box. 20 letters. 18 years of silence. She picked one at random. Postmarked 2010, 9 years ago. Her hands shook as she opened it. The handwriting was Rosie's, a little shakier than Maggie remembered, but definitely Rosie's. Mags, I know we haven't spoken in 17 years. I've been too proud to reach out, but I'm sick now. The doctors say maybe a year left. I don't want to die with this anger between us. You were right about the ranch. It was Dad's legacy, and I was selfish to ask you to sell it. I see that now. Can we talk before it's too late? I miss you, sister. Love, Rosie. The letter was dated April 15th, 2010. 9 years ago. Rosie had been sick, had asked to talk, and Maggie had never opened the letter, had never known. She opened another letter, this one from 2012. Mag, still hoping you'll call. The doctors were wrong. I'm still here. Stubborn like you, I guess. I drove by the ranch last month. Saw you in the garden. You look so much like Mama. It made my heart hurt. I wanted to stop, wanted to knock on the door, but I was afraid you'd slam it in my face. Love, Rosie. Another letter, 2015. Mags, I came by the ranch again today. Watched you fixing the fence. You're so strong. Always have been. I'm not. I need to tell you I'm sorry. I need to hear you say it's okay. But I can't seem to make myself walk up those steps. Why is it so hard to say 3 words, I'm sorry? I love you, sister. Rosie. Maggie's hands shook so hard she dropped the letters. They scattered across her bed like fallen leaves. Rosie had tried, had come to the ranch, had wanted to reconcile, and Maggie had never known. Because she'd never opened the letters. Because she'd been too proud, too stubborn, too stupid. She sat on the bed and cried. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place so far down she'd forgotten it existed. She cried for Delilah, for Thad, for the years she'd lost with Rosie, for all the pride and anger and waste. She didn't hear Jake hobble to her doorway. Didn't know he was there until he spoke. Miss Callahan, she looked up, tears streaming down her face, letters scattered around her. Jake stood in the doorway, leaning on his makeshift crutch, his face full of concern. Are you okay? Maggie tried to speak, couldn't, just shook her head. Jake hobbled into the room, sat down carefully on the edge of the bed, his broken leg extended awkwardly. What happened? Maggie handed him one of the letters, watched him read it. When he finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Your sister, he asked gently. Maggie nodded. 18 years. We haven't spoken in 18 years. And she, her voice broke. She tried. She came here. She wrote. And I never knew because I never opened them. Jake picked up another letter. Read it, then another. She loves you, he said finally. That's clear in every word. I know, and I threw it away. I threw her away because I was too proud to. She couldn't finish. Jake put his hand on her shoulder. The touch was gentle, careful. Miss Callahan, Mags, can I tell you something? She nodded, unable to speak. My brother Connor and I, we didn't speak for 5 years, 2005 to 2010. 5 years. We were both too stubborn to make the first call, both waiting for the other one to apologize first. He paused, looked at the photo in his wallet that he'd pulled from his pocket. Then Connor got T-boned by a drunk driver running a red light. Spent 2 weeks in a coma. The doctor said if he woke up, it would be a miracle. Jake's voice got rough. I sat by his bed every day, 12 hours a day, talking to him, telling him I was sorry, begging him to wake up so I could say it to his face. Did he? Maggie whispered. Yeah, he did. And the first thing he said was, I'm sorry too, brother. We both cried like babies, patched things up, had 4 good years before the cancer got him. Jake looked at Maggie. His eyes were wet. 4 years, that's what we got. And I'm grateful for every second. But I lost 5 years because of pride. 5 years I can never get back. He squeezed her shoulder gently. Your sister's still alive. These letters, the most recent ones only from last year. She's still trying, still hoping. Maggie looked at the scattered letters, at the words of love and regret and hope. What if it's too late, she whispered. What if she doesn't want to see me anymore? Then at least you'll know you tried. That's better than spending the rest of your life wondering. Maggie looked at this man, this Hell's Angel, this stranger who 2 days ago she'd hated on sight. How did you get so wise, she asked. Jake smiled sadly. Pain's a good teacher, long as you survive the lessons. They sat there for a while. The storm raged outside. The fire crackled in the other room. Finally, Maggie spoke. Jake, when this storm ends, I need to find Rosie. Then we'll find her. You said you were looking for someone too, Evangeline. Yeah. Tell me about her, and tell me about Connor. Really tell me. So Jake did. He talked for 2 hours about growing up in the orphanage, about being 5 years old and terrified and alone, about the woman with kind eyes who volunteered there, who always had time for two scared little boys. Eva, Jake said. She told us to call her Eva, said Mrs. Rousseau was too formal for friends. He talked about how Eva would read to them, how she'd bring them books and toys that the orphanage couldn't afford, how she'd listen to their dreams and never tell them they were impossible. Connor wanted to be a pilot, Jake said, smiling at the memory. Used to draw airplanes all the time. Ava brought him model kits, helped him build them, told him he'd fly someday. Did he, Maggie asked. Yeah, Army helicopter pilot. Flew medevac missions in Iraq. Saved a lot of lives. Jake's smile faded. Eva left the orphanage when we were 7. Got transferred to another city. We never saw her again. But Connor never forgot her. Used to say, when I grow up and make money, I'm gonna find Miss Eva and buy her a house. That's sweet. Connor was sweet. I was the angry one, the fighter. Connor was good. Just genuinely good. Jake pulled out the photo again. Looked at his brother's smiling face. When the cancer got bad right at the end, he made me promise. Find Eva, he said. Tell her she mattered. Tell her she made a difference. That was his last request. And you've been looking for 5 years. Yeah, Eva Rousseau's not a common name, but it's not rare either. I've chased down dozens of leads. Wrong Evas, dead Evas, Evas who never worked at orphanages. Jake's voice got softer. But 2 months ago, I found a record. A volunteer registry from a children's home in Billings. Evangeline Marie Rousseau, right age, right time frame, current address listed in Livingston, 40 miles from here. That's where you were going when you crashed. Yeah. Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then she stood up. We're going to find her, Jake. When this storm ends, we're finding Eva, and we're finding Rosie. Together. Jake looked up at her, this 81-year-old woman who'd saved his life, who'd listened to his story, who'd decided to trust him despite every reason not to. Why Blabwend, he asked. Why help me? Maggie looked at the letters on her bed, at Thad's photo on the dresser, at the window where the storm still raged. Because, she said, you remind me that it's not too late for either of us. Day 3, the morning of the 3rd day, the storm finally broke. The wind died. The snow stopped. By noon, the sun was out, turning the landscape into a blinding expanse of white. Maggie turned on the radio. Roads are being cleared. Interstate 90 should reopen by this evening. Emergency services have resumed. Anyone requiring medical assistance should... She looked at Jake. He was standing by the window looking out at the clear sky. Roads will be clear soon, she said. Yeah. You need a hospital. That leg needs proper treatment. I know. Neither of them moved. Finally, Jake turned from the window. Miss Callahan, Mags, I want to ask you something. Go ahead. Come with me to find Eva, and then we'll find Rosie together. Maggie's heart beat faster. Jake, that's a lot to ask. I barely know you. I know, but... He struggled for words. 3 days ago, you were a stranger who hated what I represented. Now you're the person who saved my life, who listened, who understood. He took a breath. I think we were meant to meet. I think Connor and Rosie and Eva and all of it. I think it's connected somehow. I can feel it. Maggie thought about the letters, about 18 years of silence, about pride and regret and second chances. Okay, she said. Jake blinked. Okay. Okay, we'll get you to a hospital first. Get that leg properly treated. Then we find Eva. Then we find Rosie. A smile spread across Jake's face. Don't smile yet, Maggie said. We don't know what we'll find. Eva might not want to see you. Rosie might slam the door in my face. Maybe, but at least we'll have tried. Maggie nodded. At least we'll have tried. 6 hours later, the truck Thad had rebuilt sat in the driveway, engine running, exhaust puffing white in the cold air. Jake sat in the passenger seat, his leg elevated on a pile of blankets, his Hells Angels jacket back on, despite Maggie's disapproval. "I earned this patch," he'd said quietly. "I'm not ashamed of it." Maggie didn't argue. She was learning, slowly, that maybe the world wasn't as simple as she'd believed, that maybe monsters didn't always wear the faces she expected. She put the truck in gear, started down the long driveway toward the cleared road. Behind them, the ranch grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Ahead, the sun was setting, painting the snow gold and pink. "Maggie," Jake said. "Yeah, whatever happens. I'm glad I crashed outside your house." Maggie smiled. "That's a strange thing to be glad about." "Maybe, but it's true." They drove in comfortable silence for a while. Then Maggie spoke. "Jake, yeah, I'm glad too." The truck rolled on through the Montana twilight, carrying two people who'd been strangers 4 days ago. Two people who'd saved each other. Two people on a mission to honor the past and maybe, just maybe, save the future. The road stretched ahead, uncertain and full of possibility. Behind them, the ranch sat quiet and empty, waiting for them to return. Home was still there, but home wasn't the destination anymore. Finding Eva was the destination. Finding Rosie. Finding peace. Finding forgiveness. The first stars appeared as they reached the highway. Jake pulled out the photo of Connor, looked at his brother's smile. "I'm coming, brother," he whispered. "I'm keeping my promise." Maggie's hand went to her pocket, where she'd tucked one of Rosie's letters. "I'm coming too, sister," she thought. Finally, the truck's headlights cut through the gathering dark, pointing the way forward. Behind them, the past. Ahead, the future. Between them, hope. January 19th, 2019. 4 days after the crash. The Billings Regional Medical Center smelled like every hospital Jake had ever been in. Antiseptic and floor wax and desperation poorly masked by artificial air freshener. He sat on the examination table while a doctor, maybe 50, silver-haired, with the bearing of a man who'd seen everything, poked at his leg and made disapproving noises. "You said this happened 4 days ago?" Dr. William Patterson asked, peering over his reading glasses. Jake looked at Maggie, who stood by the door with her arms crossed. She raised an eyebrow. They'd agreed on a story. Stick to it. "Storm came up fast," Jake said. "Crashed the bike. Miss Callahan here found me, patched me up best she could." The doctor looked at Maggie with something approaching respect. "You set this yourself?" "Field medicine," Maggie said. "My late husband was a Marine. He taught me a few things." "Well, you did a remarkable job. The break is clean, no complications. Whoever splinted this knew exactly what they were doing." He turned back to Jake. "You're fortunate. Another hour in that cold and we'd be talking about amputation instead of casts." Jake met Maggie's eyes. "Yeah, I'm fortunate." The doctor ordered x-rays, fitted Jake with a proper cast and real crutches, prescribed antibiotics and pain medication. Told him to stay off the leg for 6 weeks minimum. "6 weeks, Jake said. "Doc, I can't." 6 weeks, or you risk permanent damage. Your choice, Mr. Donovan." 2 hours later, they walked out into the winter afternoon. Jake moved better with the proper crutches, even if his pride took a hit needing them. Maggie had parked his truck at the far end of the lot. As they walked, Jake noticed her scanning the area. Old habits, looking for threats. "Thad taught you that?" he asked. "Situational awareness. He said the most dangerous thing you can do is assume you're safe." They reached the truck. Jake hauled himself into the passenger seat, his new cast awkward and heavy. Maggie climbed behind the wheel but didn't start the engine. "So," she said, "Livingston's 40 miles west. We could be there in an hour." Jake pulled out the paper where he'd written Eva's last known address, stared at it like it might disappear if he looked away. 127 Pinewood Lane, Livingston, Montana. 5 years of searching, hundreds of dead ends, and now maybe finally the end of the road. "You scared?" Maggie asked. "Terrified." "Good, means it matters." She started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot onto the highway. They drove in silence for the first 20 miles. The landscape rolled past endless white, broken by dark stands of pine and the occasional ranch house set back from the road. Finally, Maggie spoke. "What will you say when we find her?" Jake had thought about this 1,000 times, rehearsed it in his head during long nights on the road. But now, with the moment approaching, his mind went blank. "I don't know," he admitted. "How do you thank someone for kindness you barely remember, but that changed everything?" "You tell the truth. That's all you can do." "What if she doesn't remember us? What if we were just two more kids?" Maggie was quiet for a moment. "Then, Jake, I've lived 81 years. People remember kindness. Maybe not the details, maybe not the names, but they remember the feeling. And from what you've told me about Eva, Those kids weren't just a job to her. Jake nodded, hoped she was right. They passed a sign Livingston 15 miles. His heart started hammering. He'd faced down enemy combatants in Kandahar, had ridden with the Hells Angels through situations that would give normal people nightmares. But the thought of knocking on Eva's door made his palms sweat. "Maggie," he said, "yeah. For coming with me, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," she said simply, "because you're helping me find Rosie. And because," she paused, "because I think we're doing this for each other as much as for them." "Yeah, we are." Livingston appeared on the horizon, a small town, maybe 7,000 people, mountains rising behind it like sentinels. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody and strangers stood out. Maggie stopped at a gas station, asked for directions to Pinewood Lane. The attendant, a kid maybe 20 with a sparse beard, gave them a curious look. "Pinewood, north end of town. Take Main to Aspen, hang a left, follow it till you see the old church. Pinewood's right after." They followed his directions. The town gave way to older houses, well-maintained but weathered, the kind of neighborhood where people had lived for generations. Pinewood Lane was a quiet street lined with modest homes, yards buried under snow, smoke rising from chimneys. 127 was halfway down the block, a small house painted pale yellow, white trim, a porch with a swing, a mailbox shaped like a bird. Maggie pulled to the curb across the street, put the truck in park. Neither of them moved. "That's it," Jake said. His voice sounded strange in his own ears. "You want me to wait here?" Maggie asked. "No, come with me, please." They got out, crossed the street. Jake's crutches crunched in the snow. Each step felt like walking underwater. At the front walk, he stopped. His hands were shaking. Maggie put her hand on his arm. "I'm right here." Jake nodded, took a breath, moved forward. The porch steps were clear of snow. Someone had salted them recently. Jake made his way up, carefully, his cast making him awkward. He stood at the door, raised his hand to knock, stopped. "Connor," he whispered. "I'm here, brother. I made it." Then he knocked. Footsteps inside, the sound of a lock turning. The door opened. A woman stood there. Not Eva, too young, maybe 40. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, kind eyes that looked tired. "Can I help you?" she asked. Jake's mouth went dry. I'm looking for Evangeline Rousseau. Is this still her residence?" Something changed in the woman's expression. Sadness flickered across her face. "I'm Beatrice, Eva's daughter. Can I ask what this is about?" Was, past tense. The word hit Jake like a punch to the gut. "I'm Jake Donovan," he managed. "My brother Connor and I. Your mother helped us when we were kids, at the children's home." "I wanted to. I needed to." He couldn't finish. The words stuck in his throat. Beatrice's expression softened. "You're one of her boys. From the home." "Yes, ma'am." Beatrice looked at him for a long moment, then at Maggie, then back to Jake. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "Mom passed away 3 months ago." The world tilted. Jake felt Maggie's hand on his elbow steadying him. 3 months, he whispered. November 14th. It was peaceful. She went in her sleep. Jake couldn't breathe. 5 years of searching, thousands of miles, dozens of false leads, and he'd missed her by 3 months. 3 months. "I can see this is a shock," Beatrice said softly. "Would you like to come in?" Jake nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Beatrice led them into a small living room, comfortable furniture, photos covering every available surface, shelves lined with books and knickknacks. "Please sit," Beatrice said. Maggie helped Jake to the couch. He sat heavily, his crutches clattering to the floor. He barely noticed. Beatrice sat across from them. "Can I ask, which boys were you Mom helped so many children over the years?" "Donovan," Jake said. "Jake and Connor Donovan, twin boys. We were at the Riverside Children's Home in 1977. We were 5 years old." Beatrice's eyes widened. "The twins, of course. Mom talked about you." Jake's head snapped up. "She did all the time, especially near the end." Beatrice stood. "Wait here, please." She left the room. Jake sat in stunned silence. Maggie said nothing, just kept her hand on his arm. Beatrice returned carrying a large box, old cardboard reinforced with tape. She set it on the coffee table. "Mom kept records," she said, "of every child she helped. She always hoped they'd come back someday." She opened the box. Inside, file folders, dozens of them, organized by year. Beatrice pulled out a folder marked 1977, Riverside. inside photos, intake forms, notes in neat handwriting, and their third page down a photo of two 5-year-old boys, identical, scared eyes, holding hands. Underneath in Eva's handwriting, Jake and Connor Donovan, twin boys, so frightened, so brave. Arrived June 15, 1977, both extremely protective of each other. Jake tends to act out when scared. Connor withdraws, need extra patience and love. Jake stared at the photo. He barely remembered being that small, that vulnerable. Beatrice pulled out another page. More notes dated later. July 3, 1977. The twins are settling in. Jake got in a fight today defending Connor from an older boy. Had to explain that violence isn't the answer, but proud of his protective instinct. Connor drew me a picture of a bird. Said his mother used to watch birds before she died. My heart breaks for them. August 12, 1977. Brought the boys model airplanes. Connor's face lit up like Christmas morning. Jake pretended not to care, but I caught him smiling when he thought I wasn't looking. These boys have been through so much. I pray they find a good home. I pray they remember they are loved. Jake's vision blurred. Tears ran down his face unchecked. Maggie's hand tightened on his arm. Beatrice continued pulling out pages. Years of notes. Eva had tracked them even after she'd left Riverside. Had called the home to check on them. Had celebrated when they'd been adopted together by a family in Idaho. Had worried when the adoption had failed 2 years later and they'd gone back into the system. The last entry was dated September 1982. Lost track of the Donovan twins after they aged out of the system. Tried to find them, but no luck. I think about them often. Wonder if they remember me. Wonder if they know how special they were. How much they mattered. I pray they're safe. I pray they're together. I pray they know they were loved. Jake put his face in his hands and sobbed. All these years he'd wondered if they'd mattered to Eva, if they'd been more than just two more forgotten kids. And here was the proof, pages of it, years of caring, of remembering, of love. Maggie wrapped her arm around his shoulders. Let him cry. Beatrice waited quietly until the storm passed. Finally, Jake looked up. His voice was raw. You have no idea what this means. There's more, Beatrice said gently. She reached into the box again, pulled out an envelope, addressed in Eva's handwriting. Connor Donovan, if he ever comes back. Jake's hand trembled as he took it. When did she write this? Last year, after her diagnosis. She wrote letters to several of her kids, the ones she remembered most clearly. She told me to keep them, in case anyone ever came looking. Jake turned the envelope over in his hands. Connor's name. Connor who died 5 years ago. Connor who'd never get to read this. May I, Jake asked. Of course, it's yours. Jake opened the envelope carefully. Inside, 2 pages of lined paper covered in Eva's careful script. He read aloud, his voice breaking. Dear Connor, if you're reading this, it means you came back. I always hoped you would. I want you to know you were never just another child to me. You and Jake were special. Your smiles lit up the darkest days at Riverside. Your fierce love for each other reminded me why I did this work. I'm sorry I couldn't stay. I'm sorry I couldn't adopt you both like I wanted. The home needed me elsewhere, and I was young and believed I could help more children if I moved. I regret that decision. You two needed stability and I left. But not a day went by that I didn't pray for you. I prayed you found love, found purpose, found peace. I prayed you and Jake stayed together, stayed brothers, stayed true to each other. If you became half the man I know you could be, then this world is better for having you in it. You had such kindness in you, Connor. Such gentleness, such hope. The world needs people like you. I hope you learn to fly. I remember how you loved airplanes, how you draw them on every piece of paper you could find. I hope you got to touch the sky. Thank you for remembering me. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for letting me know that I mattered to you because you mattered so much to me. With all my love, Ava Rousseau, P.S. Tell Jake I remember him too. Tell him his fierce protectiveness was never a flaw. Tell him the world needs warriors who fight for the people they love. Tell him I'm proud of the man he became. The silence stretched. Jake folded the letter carefully, held it against his chest. He wanted to come, he said finally. Connor, he talked about finding you for years, but life got in the way. The military, deployments, then the cancer. He died 5 years ago. Never got the chance. He died, I'm so sorry, Beatrice said. He was the good one, Jake continued. I was the screw-up, The angry one, the one who joined a motorcycle club and spent 23 years riding from town to town, never belonging anywhere. Connor was the hero, army pilot, saved lives, made a difference. He looked at Maggie. And I'm the one who survived. How's that fair? Maggie met his eyes. Jake, you survived because Connor wanted you to. Because someone had to complete this mission. Someone had to come here and let Eva know she mattered. But she's gone. I'm too late. No, Beatrice said firmly. Both Jake and Maggie looked at her. You're not too late, Beatrice continued. Mom died not knowing if any of her kids remembered her, not knowing if she made a difference. Yes, you're too late to tell her in person, but you're not too late to honor her memory. She stood, walked to a shelf, took down a photo album. Mom worked with children for 42 years. Thousands of kids passed through her programs. But these, she opened the album. These were her special ones, the ones she never forgot. Page after page of photos, children of all ages, some smiling, some scared, some angry, all saved by Eva's kindness. And there on page 7, the photo from the file. Jake and Connor at 5 years old. Underneath, Eva had written, "My twin boys. I pray they found each other again." We did, Jake whispered to the photo. We stayed together until the end, Eva. We stayed brothers. Beatrice closed the album. Mom would want you to know that you mattered, that you weren't forgotten, that the scared little boy who fought to protect his brother grew up to be a man who keeps his promises. She pulled out one more item from the box. A wooden cross. Simple. Handmade. This was Mom's. She wore it every day. I'd like you to have it. For Connor. Jake took the cross. It was warm from Beatrice's hand, smooth from years of wear. I can't. Yes, you can. Mom would want one of her boys to have it. And since Connor can't be here, you'll carry it for him. Jake closed his fist around the cross. They talked for another hour. Beatrice showed them more photos, told them about Eva's life, her work, her faith, her unshakable belief that every child deserved love. When they finally stood to leave, Beatrice walked them to the door. Jake, she said, can I tell you something? Of course, and Mom used to say that the children she helped were angels in disguise, that they taught her more about love than she ever taught them. You and Connor, you were part of her purpose, part of her joy. Jake embraced her, this stranger who was somehow family. Outside, the sun was setting, the temperature was dropping. Maggie and Jake walked to the truck in silence. Jake got in, sat there with the cross in one hand and Eva's letter in the other. I'm sorry, Maggie said quietly. She remembered us, Jake said. His voice was filled with wonder and grief. All these years I thought we were just two more kids. But she remembered. Of course she did. You mattered to her. Jake looked at the house, at the warm light in the windows. I wish Connor could have known that we mattered, that she never forgot us. He knows, Maggie said with certainty. Wherever he is, he knows. She started the truck. Where to now? Jake looked at her. Now we find Rosie. Your turn. Maggie's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Jake, after what just happened, we don't have to. Yes, we do. We made a deal. And more than that, I need to see this end better than mine did. I need to see you get your chance. Maggie was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out one of Rosie's letters. The return address was visible. 42 Larkspur Avenue, Bozeman, Montana. Bozeman's 90 miles east, Maggie said. We could be there by 8 o'clock. Then let's go. Jake, it's getting late. We should find a motel. Start fresh tomorrow morning. Maggie, every day you wait is another day you don't know. Another day of wondering. I just lost my chance. Don't lose yours. Maggie looked at the letter, at Rosie's handwriting, at 18 years of silence condensed into a few pieces of paper. Okay, she said. Bozeman. She pulled onto the highway heading east. The sun sank behind them, painting the sky orange and purple. Jake settled back in his seat. He felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped out his insides and left him empty, but also strangely at peace. He'd done it. He'd kept his promise to Connor. He'd found Eva, had learned that they'd mattered, that they'd been loved. It wasn't the ending he'd hoped for, but it was an ending. And sometimes that was enough. He closed his eyes, let the rumble of the road lull him. When he woke, it was dark. The truck was stopped. Where are we? He asked, his voice thick with sleep. Bozeman, Maggie said. She sounded tense. But Jake, there's a problem. He sat up, looked around. They were parked on a residential street. Nice houses, established neighborhood. Maggie pointed to the house that matched the address on the letter, 42 Larkspur Avenue. But something was wrong. The house was dark. Not just lights off dark, empty dark. The driveway was bare. No car, no signs of life. And in the front yard, a sign for sale. No, Maggie whispered. Jake grabbed his crutches. Stay here, I'll check. Jake, your leg. I'm fine. He got out, made his way to the front porch, knocked on the door. Nothing. He tried the knob, locked. He peered through the window. Empty rooms. No furniture. No people. He made his way back to the truck. Maggie's face was pale in the dashboard lights. She's gone. We don't know that. Maybe she just moved. Or maybe she's dead. Maybe I waited too long and now she's gone and I'll never stop. Jake said firmly, we're not giving up. He looked at the for sale sign, saw the realtor's name and number. Tomorrow morning, first thing we call that number. We find out where Rosie went, and we find her. What if they won't tell us privacy laws, Jake? They can't just. Then we'll figure something else out. But we're not quitting. Maggie slumped in her seat. All the strength seemed to drain out of her. I'm too late, she said. Just like you were too late for Eva. Maggie, Jake took her hand. Look at me. She did. I was 3 months too late to see Eva alive. But I wasn't too late to learn the truth, to know she remembered us, to honor her memory. Even if Rosie is, he couldn't say it. Even if she's gone, you can still find out what happened. You can still make peace with it. I don't want to make peace with it, Maggie said, her voice breaking. I want to tell her I'm sorry. I want to hug her. I want my sister back. I know, and we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. But right now we need rest. We need food. We need to think clearly. He was right and Maggie knew it. She was exhausted. They both were. She drove to a motel on the edge of town, a mom-and-pop place called the Ponderosa Inn. 2 rooms available. The clerk, an elderly man with kind eyes, checked them in without comment. Their rooms were next to each other, clean but basic. Maggie helped Jake to his room, made sure he had his medication. Get some sleep, she said. We'll figure this out in the morning. But sleep didn't come easily. Maggie lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Rosie, about all the years wasted, about pride and stubbornness, and all the things she should have said but didn't. Around midnight, she heard movement in Jake's room, then his door opening. She got up, found him sitting on the curb outside his cast, propped awkwardly, Eva's cross in his hand. Can't sleep, she asked. Keep thinking about Connor, wishing I could tell him, about Eva, about the letter. Maggie sat down beside him. The night was cold but clear, stars visible despite the town lights. Tell him now, she said. Jake looked at her. He's not here, but tell him anyway. Say what you need to say. Yeah, Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up at the stars. Connor, he said softly. I found her brother. I found Eva. And you were right. She did remember us. She loved us. You weren't just imagining it. His voice got stronger. She kept notes about us. Photos. She wrote you a letter. It's beautiful, man. She told you she's proud of you, that you made a difference. Tears ran down his face. I wish you were here to read it yourself. I wish you could have heard her say it. But I'm telling you now, you mattered, Connor. You mattered to her. You mattered to me. You still matter. He pressed the cross to his heart. I'm going to carry this for both of us. Going to remember that we were loved, that we weren't forgotten, that Eva Rousseau saw 2 scared little boys and loved them anyway. The night was silent except for the distant sound of traffic. Maggie put her hand on Jake's shoulder. He heard you. You think, I know. They sat there for a while. 2 broken people under a Montana sky, both searching for something they'd lost, both hoping it wasn't too late to find it. Finally, Maggie spoke. Jake, tomorrow when we call that realtor, what if they tell me Rosie's dead? Then we'll find out where she's buried. We'll visit her grave. You'll tell her you're sorry, and you'll know you tried. And if she's alive but doesn't want to see me, then at least you'll know, and knowing is better than spending the rest of your life wondering. Maggie nodded. You're right. Besides, Jake said with a small smile, you didn't drag me out of a blizzard just to give up now. I don't feel strong. Strong people rarely do. That's what makes them strong. They went back inside. This time sleep came easier. January 20th, 2019. The next morning, Maggie called the realtor at 8 o'clock sharp. A woman answered. Friendly voice. Professional. Bozeman Premier Properties, this is Jennifer. Yes, hello. I'm calling about the property at 42 Larkspur Avenue. It's listed for sale. Oh yes, beautiful home, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, recently renovated kitchen. Are you interested in viewing it? Actually, I'm trying to locate the previous owner, Rosalind Callahan. It's a family matter. A pause. I'm sorry, but I can't give out personal information about our clients. I understand, but this is urgent. Rosie is my sister. We've been out of touch for many years. I need to find her. Another pause. Longer this time. Ma'am, I really can't. Look, I'm sorry, but privacy laws. Please, Maggie said. Her voice broke. Please, she's my baby sister. I haven't seen her in 18 years. I need to tell her I'm sorry. I need to know she's okay. Silence on the other end, then a sigh. I could lose my license for this, Jennifer said quietly. But hold on. The sound of typing, pages rustling. The property was sold 8 months ago. The seller was Rosalind Callahan, age 78. Forwarding address. More typing. Missoula, 1847 Cottonwood Drive. Maggie's heart leaped. She's alive. As of 8 months ago, yes, that's all I can tell you. Thank you so much, and I hope you find her, Jennifer said. And I hope it goes well. Maggie hung up, looked at Jake, who'd been listening. Missoula, she said, and she's in Missoula. How far? 200 miles, 4 hours maybe. Jake stood, grabbed his crutches. Then what are we waiting for? 2 hours later, they were on the road. Maggie drove with white knuckles. Every mile closer to Missoula was a mile closer to answers. To Rosie, to the moment that would define the rest of her life. Jake sat quietly watching the landscape roll by. He'd texted Ironside last night, told him what had happened, where he was. Ironside had responded simply, "Do what you gotta do, brother. We're here when you need us." The Hells Angels weren't just a club to Jake. They were family, had been for 23 years. But sitting in this truck with Maggie on this impossible quest to heal old wounds, this felt like family too. They stopped for gas in Deer Lodge, grabbed coffee and sandwiches, kept moving. Missoula appeared on the horizon around 2 in the afternoon, bigger than Billings or Bozeman. College town, young people everywhere. Maggie followed the GPS to Cottonwood Drive, a quiet neighborhood, older homes, trees bare for winter. 1847 was a small ranch-style house, yellow siding, red door, flower boxes on the windows empty now, but clearly tended. A car sat in the driveway. Someone was home. Maggie pulled to the curb, put the truck in park, then sat there frozen. "I can't," she whispered. "Jake, I can't do this." "Yes, you can. What if she slams the door in my face? What if she tells me to leave? What if she's been waiting 18 years for you to knock?" Jake countered. "What if she's sitting in there right now hoping for exactly this?" Maggie looked at the house, at the red door, at the possibility of redemption on the other side. "Will you come with me?" she asked. "All the way to the door." They got out, walked up the sidewalk together, Jake's crutches clicking on the concrete. At the door, Maggie paused. Her hands shook as she reached for the doorbell. "You've got this," Jake said quietly. Maggie pressed the button, heard the chime inside. Footsteps. Slow, careful. The door opened, and there stood Rosalind Callahan, 78 years old, white hair cut short, thinner than Maggie remembered, wearing a cardigan over a simple dress, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. The sisters stared at each other. 18 years collapsed into a single moment. "Mags," Rosie's voice was barely a whisper. "Rosie." Maggie could hardly speak. "I'm so sorry." Rosie's hand went to her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I thought you'd never come," she said. "I'm here now. I'm here, and I'm sorry, and I love you." Rosie stepped forward, pulled Maggie into her arms. The sisters held each other and cried. 18 years of pain and regret and love poured out in that embrace. Jake stepped back, gave them space. His own eyes were wet. Finally, the sisters separated, both of them crying, both of them smiling. "Come in," Rosie said. "Please come in." She looked at Jake. "Both of you." They went inside. The house was warm, lived in, photos on every wall, books on every surface. Rosie made tea. Her hands shook as she poured. They sat in the living room, Maggie and Rosie on the couch holding hands like they were afraid to let go. Jake in a chair, quiet, bearing witness. "How did you find me?" Rosie asked. "Your letters," Maggie said. "I finally opened them, and Jake here, he helped me track you down." Rosie looked at Jake, really looked at him. You saved my sister's life. She saved mine first, Jake said simply. Then your family, Rosie said. Anyone who takes care of Maggie is family to me. Jake ducked his head. I appreciate that, ma'am. Rosie, she corrected. Call me Rosie. The afternoon turned to evening. Rosie made dinner, simple food, pot roast and potatoes and vegetables from her summer garden, preserved and frozen. They ate together, talked more, laughed, cried a little more. They talked for hours. About Thad's death, about Rosie's life, her late husband Gerald, who'd passed 10 years ago, her work as a librarian, the garden she tended in summer, about the letters, the visits to the ranch, the years of wanting to reconcile but not knowing how. I drove by the ranch last month, Rosie said, right before Christmas. The place looked so lonely, so empty. And I thought maybe you'd moved. Maybe you'd sold it after all. Never, Maggie said. That ranch is my home. Thad's legacy, our legacy. And Rosie, she took a breath. It's your legacy too. It always was. I should have shared it with you instead of hoarding it. I didn't want the ranch, Mags. Not really. I just wanted to feel like I mattered as much as it did. You matter more. You always did. I was just too blind to show it. Rosie started crying again. Maggie joined her. Jake stood quietly. I'm going to step outside, give you two some privacy. Jake, wait, Maggie said. Rosie, I need to tell you something. About Jake, about how we met. And she did. She told the whole story. The storm, the crash, finding Jake in the snow, dragging him to safety despite hating what he represented, the 3 days trapped together, the journey to find Eva. He gave me the courage to find you, Maggie finished. He showed me it's never too late. Rosie looked at Jake with new eyes. Then your family, Rosie said again. Truly. Around 8 o'clock, Jake's phone rang. Ironside. Brother, just checking in. You good? Yeah, we found her, Maggie's sister. They're together now. Good, real good. Listen, the club's planning to ride through Montana next week. Thought maybe we'd swing by. Pay our respects to the woman who saved your ass. Jake looked at Maggie and Rosie, at two sisters reunited after 18 years. I'd like that, he said. I'd like that a lot. He hung up, looked at the sisters. Maggie, how would you feel about some visitors at the ranch next week? The club, she asked. Yeah, they want to meet you. Maggie hesitated, remembered Delilah, remembered her hatred of bikers. Then she looked at Jake, at this good man who wore colors she'd once despised, who'd helped her find her sister, who'd shown her that people were more than their patches and their past. They're welcome, she said, all of them. Jake smiled. As night fell, Rosie insisted they stay. She had a guest room and a couch that pulled out to a bed. Jake took the couch despite Rosie's protests. He was used to sleeping rough. A pull-out couch was luxury. Maggie and Rosie stayed up late, talking, sharing memories, building bridges over the canyon of 18 years. Jake lay in the dark listening to their voices in the other room, the sound of laughter, of healing. He thought about Connor, about Eva, about promises kept even if they came too late. He touched the cross around his neck, Eva's cross, a reminder that love endures, that kindness matters, that the scared little boy he'd been had grown into a man who kept his word. We did it, Connor, he thought. We finished the mission, and for the first time in 5 years, Jake Donovan slept without nightmares. In the other room, Maggie and Rosie finally said goodnight. Maggie lay in Rosie's guest bed, comfortable, safe, home. She thought about the storm, about finding Jake, about the impossible journey that had led her here. Thank you, Thad, she whispered, for teaching me to save lives, for teaching me about second chances. She closed her eyes, smiled, and slept peacefully for the first time in 12 years. Outside Montana, winter held the world in its frozen grip, but inside 2 houses in 2 towns, warmth had returned. Promises kept, sisters reunited, families forged from strangers and storm. The journey wasn't over, but the hardest part was done. They'd found what they'd been looking for, and in finding it, they'd found themselves. February 2019. 6 weeks after the blizzard, spring came to Montana the way it always did. Reluctant, hesitant, like it wasn't quite sure winter was ready to let go. Jake Donovan stood on the porch of the Callahan Ranch watching the last patches of snow surrender to mud and new grass. The cast had come off yesterday. His leg was weak but healing. The doctor had said he was lucky. He touched the cross around his neck. Eva's cross. Thought about Connor. about promises and second chances and roads that led home even when you didn't know you were looking for one. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. "Coffee's ready," Maggie said. She looked different than she had that night in the storm, lighter somehow, like someone had lifted a weight she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten it was there. "Thanks," Jake said. He followed her inside. The kitchen smelled like bacon and fresh bread. Rosie stood at the stove humming something that might have been a hymn. She'd moved into the ranch 2 weeks ago. Just temporarily, she'd said. Just until Maggie got used to having someone around again. But Jake suspected temporarily was going to turn permanent. The sisters had 18 years to make up for. They weren't wasting time. "Sit," Rosie ordered, pointing at the table with a spatula. "You're still healing. No standing around in my kitchen." "Yes, ma'am." Jake sat. Maggie poured coffee, strong and black. The way Thad used to drink it, she told him once. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence. This had become routine. Jake had stayed at the ranch after they'd returned from Missoula. Just until his leg healed, he'd said. Just until he figured out what came next. But the truth was, he wasn't in a hurry to leave. For the first time in 23 years since he joined the Hells Angels and made the road his home, Jake Donovan felt like he belonged somewhere. Rosie cleared the plates. "So your club brothers are coming today?" "Yeah, should be here around noon." Maggie's hands tightened slightly on her coffee cup. Jake noticed. "Maggie, if you're not comfortable." "No," she said firmly. "I'm fine. They're your family, your brothers. They're welcome here." But Jake heard the tension in her voice, saw the way she glanced at the photo of Delilah on the shelf, the friend she'd lost to bikers 41 years ago. Some wounds healed slower than others. Around 11:30 they heard it, the rumble of motorcycles in the distance, growing louder. Jake stood, walked to the window. 10 bikes came up the long driveway, Harleys mostly, chrome gleaming in the spring sun, Hells Angels patches visible even from a distance. Leading the pack was Ironside, massive, gray beard down to his chest, eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. The bikes circled once in the yard, then cut their engines. Silence fell. Jake walked out onto the porch. Maggie and Rosie stood behind him. Ironside dismounted, pulled off his sunglasses, looked at Jake, then he smiled. "Reaper, you ugly son of a bitch. Good to see you standing." "Good to be standing," Jake said. They embraced, hard, the way men do when words aren't enough. The other riders dismounted. Jake knew them all. Hammer, Doc, Redbone, Cisco, Snake, Ghost, Wrench, Tiny, Mouse. His brothers. Ironside turned to Maggie and Rosie, pulled off his bandana, held it in his hands respectfully. "Ma'am," he said to Maggie, "I'm Ironside, president of the Montana Hells Angels. This is my crew." Maggie stepped forward, small and white-haired and 81 years old, facing down 10 bikers without a trace of fear. "Margaret Callahan," she said, "this is my sister Rosalind. Welcome to my home." Ironside nodded slowly. "We came to pay our respects, ma'am, for saving our brother, for giving him shelter, for showing him kindness when you had every reason not to." "I did what needed doing." "No, ma'am," Ironside said. "You did what good people do. There's a difference." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded piece of leather, a vest, black, but different from the ones the men wore. No bottom rocker, no territory markings, just the winged death's head, the Hells Angels logo. And underneath, stitched in white thread, "Maggie, friend of the club." Ironside held it out. "In our world, ma'am, this means something. Means you're under our protection. Means anywhere you go, any Hells Angel sees this patch, they'll treat you like family, because that's what you are now." Maggie stared at the vest, at the patch she'd hated for 41 years. Jake held his breath. Slowly, Maggie reached out, took the vest. "I never thought I'd wear these colors," she said quietly. "You earned them," Ironside said simply. Maggie looked at Jake, at the cross around his neck, at the man who'd shown her that people were more than their worst moments, more than their mistakes, more than their patches. She put on the vest. It hung loose on her small frame, but somehow it looked right. Ironside smiled. "The thanks is ours, ma'am." Rosie stepped forward. "Well, if you boys are going to be family, you might as well come inside and eat. I made enough food for an army." The bikers followed her into the house, big men in leather and denim filling Maggie's kitchen with their presence. But they were gentle, respectful. Called both women, ma'am. Wiped their boots before coming inside. Helped set the table. They ate together, roast beef and mashed potatoes and green beans from Rosie's garden last summer. Fresh bread, apple pie. The bikers told stories about rides and close calls and brothers they'd lost, about the code they lived by, loyalty, brotherhood, protection. Maggie listened, and slowly she began to understand. These weren't the men who'd killed Delilah. These were men who'd built a family from nothing, who'd found belonging in a world that had rejected them. Not so different from her, really. After dinner, Jake and Ironside walked outside. The other bikers were checking their bikes, preparing for the ride back. "You're staying," Ironside said. Not a question. "Yeah, for a while longer anyway." "She's good for you, the old lady. Both of them." Jake smiled. "They are. You look different, brother. Settled, like you found something you didn't know you were looking for." Jake thought about that. "Maybe I did." Ironside pulled out a cigarette, offered one to Jake. Jake shook his head. He'd quit smoking the day he'd woken up in Maggie's house. "The club's always there," Ironside said, "when you're ready to come back. But Jake, brother, if this is where you need to be, we support that. Family supports family, even when it means letting go." "I'm not leaving the club," Jake said. "Aren't you?" Jake was quiet. He'd been thinking about it, about what came next, about the road and the ranch, and the life he'd lived versus the life he could live. "I don't know," he admitted. "That's honest." Ironside took a drag, exhaled smoke into the spring air. "Connor would want you to be happy, wherever that is." "I know. And Reaper. For what it's worth, I think you found your place, right here." The bikers left an hour later, engines roaring, leather gleaming. They circled the yard once in salute, then disappeared down the long driveway. Jake stood with Maggie and Rosie, watching them go. "Nice men," Rosie said. "They are," Jake agreed. Maggie said nothing, just looked at the vest in her hands, at the patch she'd never thought she'd wear. "Thad would have liked them," she said finally. Jake smiled. "Yeah, I think he would have." That night, after Rosie had gone to bed, Jake and Maggie sat on the porch. The sky was clear, stars visible. The kind of night that made you believe in something bigger than yourself. "Jake," Maggie said, "can I ask you something? Anything. What are you going to do when your leg is fully healed, when there's no reason to stay?" Jake had been asking himself the same question. "I don't know," he said honestly. "The club is my family, has been for 23 years. But this place, you and Rosie, it feels like family too. You can have both, you know. Visit us. Go back to the club. You don't have to choose." "Don't I?" Maggie was quiet for a moment. "What do you want Jake really want?" Jake looked out at the dark fields, at the barn where he'd been helping Maggie with repairs, at the fence line he'd mended last week, at the garden plot where Rosie wanted to plant vegetables come summer. "I want what Connor never got," he said quietly. "I want a home, not just a place to sleep, but a real home, with people who know my name, who care if I come back at night." He stopped, shook his head. "Sounds foolish." "No," Maggie said. "It sounds human." She stood, put her hand on his shoulder. "Jake Donovan, you saved my life as much as I saved yours. You gave me back my sister. You showed me that forgiveness is possible. That family is what you make it, not just what you're born into." She squeezed his shoulder. "This ranch has been empty too long, lonely too long. If you want a home, it's here, for as long as you want it." Jake's throat tightened. "Maggie, I can't just..." "You can. Thad built this place to be a home. Not just for us, for anyone who needed it. He'd want you here. I want you here, and I think Connor would want it too." Jake looked up at her, this woman who'd dragged him from a blizzard, who'd taught him about second chances. "Thank you," he managed. "Thank me by staying," Maggie said. Then she went inside. Jake sat alone in the dark, thinking about roads and homes and the difference between running and arriving. He pulled out his phone, texted Ironside. "I'm staying, retiring from the road. Hope you understand." The reply came fast. "I do, brother. You earned your rest. Come visit when you can. We'll always have a place for you." Jake looked at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "Thanks for everything." "That's what brothers do," Ironside replied. "Now go live your life. You've earned it." Jake put the phone away, sat under the Montana stars, and felt for the first time since Connor died like he could breathe. The next morning, Rosie had an announcement. "I've been thinking," she said over breakfast, "about Missoula, about my house there." "What about it?" Maggie asked. "I'm going to sell it. Move here permanently, if that's okay with you." Maggie's face lit up. "Okay, Rosie, I've been hoping you'd say that since you got here." Good, because this place needs two stubborn old ladies running it. Three, Jake said. Both sisters looked at him. What, I'm not that old, but I'm definitely stubborn. They laughed. The sound filled the kitchen, warmth and joy in the sound of a house becoming a home again. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Maggie ran the ranch operations, managing the small herd of cattle she kept, dealing with the business side. Rosie took over the house, cooking, cleaning, organizing, making the place feel lived in again. Jake did the physical work, mending fences, repairing the barn, maintaining the equipment, all the things Maggie had been struggling to do alone. They worked together, ate together, sat on the porch together in the evenings. Slowly, the ranch came back to life. Late March 2019, one afternoon, Jake was working on the tractor when a truck pulled into the yard. Unfamiliar, out-of-state plates. Jake stood, wiped his hands on a rag, watched a woman get out, maybe 45, professional looking, carrying a briefcase. Can I help you? Jake called. The woman approached. I'm looking for Margaret Callahan. She's in the house. Can I ask what this is about? I'm Jennifer Cole, the realtor who helped Miss Callahan find her sister. I have some paperwork for her to sign. Oh, right, come on in. He led her to the house. Maggie and Rosie were in the kitchen canning preserves. Maggie, someone here to see you. Maggie turned, saw Jennifer. Recognition dawned. Ms. Cole, I didn't expect you to drive all the way out here. I was in the area, Jennifer said, and I wanted to meet you in person. After our phone call, I wanted to see how it turned out. It turned out perfectly, Maggie said, putting her arm around Rosie. This is my sister. Rosie, this is Jennifer, the woman who helped me find you. Rosie embraced Jennifer. I'm glad it worked out, Jennifer said. She looked around the kitchen, at the warmth, the life. This is beautiful. You can feel the love in this house. They sat. Jennifer pulled out the paperwork. Rosie signed. The house in Missoula would sell. The money would go toward ranch improvements. As Jennifer was leaving, she paused. Ms. Callahan, can I tell you something? Of course. When you called me that day, looking for your sister, I wasn't supposed to help you. I could have lost my license. But something in your voice, you sounded so desperate. And I thought, what's the point of rules if they keep people apart who love each other? She smiled. I'm glad I broke the rules. I'm glad you found each other. So am I, Maggie said. More than you know. And after Jennifer left, Maggie stood in the yard for a long time, looking at the ranch, at the life she'd rebuilt. Jake came to stand beside her. You okay? He asked. More than okay, Maggie said. For the first time in 12 years, I'm more than okay. Dad would be proud of you. I think he would be proud of all of us. She looked at Jake. You've become quite the rancher, you know. I would have liked him. They stood in comfortable silence. Then Maggie spoke again. Jake, there's something I need to do, something I've been putting off. What's that? Visit Delilah's grave. I haven't been since the funeral, 41 years. I think I need to tell her something. Jake nodded slowly. Want company? I'd like that. 2 days later, they drove to the cemetery. Small, local. Most of the graves were old, weathered headstones marking lives long over. Delilah Morrison's grave was in the back corner, under a cottonwood tree. The headstone was simple. Delilah Rose Morrison, 1951 to 1983. Gone too soon, forever loved. Maggie knelt, placed the flowers on the grave. Wildflowers, Delilah's favorite. Hi, Dee, she said softly. It's been a long time. Too long. Jake stood back, giving her space. I'm sorry I haven't visited. I was angry at the men who did this to you, at the world for taking you, at myself for not being there to protect you. She touched the headstone. I let that anger make me hard, Dee. Made me hate people I didn't know, judge them for wearing the same patches as the men who hurt you. She looked back at Jake. But I met someone, a biker, a Hell's Angel, and he showed me something and showed me that people are more than their worst moments, that redemption is possible, that family comes in unexpected forms. She smiled through tears. You would have liked him, Dee. He's good people, and he helped me find Rosie. After 18 years, we're together again. The wind rustled through the cottonwood tree, gentle, like a whisper. I'm going to be okay now, Maggie said. I'm not alone anymore. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just grateful for the time we had, for the friendship we shared. She stood, kissed her fingers, pressed them to the headstone. Rest easy, friend. I'll visit more often, I promise. As they walked back to the truck, Jake spoke. She'd be proud of you. You think, I know. April 2019, that evening, Rosie made a special dinner, all of Maggie's favorites. What's the occasion? Maggie asked. No occasion, just celebrating family. They ate together, talked and laughed, told stories about Thad and Connor and Eva and all the people who'd shaped their lives. After dinner, Rosie pulled out an old photo album, pictures of her and Maggie as children, as teenagers, as young women. Look at us, Rosie said, pointing to a photo from 1965. Two girls in summer dresses, smiling in front of the ranch house. We were so young, so sure we'd always be together. And then life happened, Maggie said. And then life happened, Rosie agreed. But we're together now, that's what matters. She turned the page. More photos, their parents, long dead, family gatherings, Christmases, birthdays, a whole life documented in fading photographs. We should take a new one, Jake said. New photo for the album. That's a wonderful idea, Rosie said. They set up the camera on a timer, positioned themselves on the porch, Maggie in the middle, Rosie on one side, Jake on the other. The camera flashed. Three people who'd found each other in the storm. Three people who'd become family. Later that night, Jake printed the photo, added it to the album, wrote underneath Maggie, Rosie, and Jake, Spring 2019, family. July 2019, 6 months after the blizzard summer came to Montana. Hot days, cool nights, the ranch thrived. Rosie's garden produced vegetables, tomatoes and peppers and squash, more than they could eat. They canned what they could, gave the rest to neighbors. The cattle herd grew. Maggie bought 3 more head. Jake built a new corral, the house filled with life, laughter, purpose. Jake's leg healed completely. Strong as ever, he could ride again if he wanted to. But the motorcycle sat in the barn gathering dust. He didn't miss it, didn't miss the road. Ironside and the club visited twice more. Each time they stayed for dinner, talked with Maggie and Rosie like old friends. The third time they visited in late August, Ironside pulled Jake aside. Brother, I need to make it official. You're retiring from the club. No more runs, no more mandatory meetings. You're done. Jake nodded slowly. I understand. But Ironside continued, you're still a Hell's Angel. That doesn't change. You earned that patch. You keep it. And if you ever need us, we're there. Always. He handed Jake a new patch, retirement rocker, to go on the bottom of the jacket. Retired with honor, Jake read. They embraced, long, hard. Be happy, Ironside said. That's all Connor would want. I am, Jake said. For the first time in my life, I really am. September 2019. In September, Beatrice called. Eva's daughter, Jake had given her his number, asked her to stay in touch. Jake, I wanted to let you know, we had a small memorial service for Mom at the orphanage where she worked. They renamed the library after her, the Evangeline Rousseau Library for Children. Jake's throat tightened. That's beautiful. I wish you could have been there, but I wanted you to know, Mom's being remembered for all the good she did. She deserves that. She loved you, Jake. She loved all her kids, but you and Connor, you were special to her. After they hung up, Jake sat on the porch, holding Eva's cross. We did it, Connor, he thought. We honored her, and she's being remembered for all the good she did, all the love she gave. He looked out at the ranch, at Maggie and Rosie working in the garden, at the home they'd built together. I found my place, brother. Finally, I'm home. October 2019. October brought the first snow. Light, beautiful, covering the ranch in white. Jake stood at the window watching it fall, remembering another storm, another time. Maggie came to stand beside him. Thinking about the blizzard, she asked. Yeah, seems like a lifetime ago. In some ways it was. We're different people now. Better people. I like to think so. They watched the snow together. Maggie, Jake said, I never asked. Why did you really save me that night after everything you'd been through with Delilah, after all your reasons to leave me there? Why, Maggie was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke. You said something when you were half frozen, barely conscious. You said you had to find someone, that you promised your brother. And I heard in your voice the same desperation I felt every time I thought about calling Rosie. She turned to look at him. I saved you because I saw myself in you, someone trying to make things right, someone running out of time, someone who needed a second chance. And you gave me one. We gave each other one. Jake put his arm around her shoulders. This woman who'd become his family, his friend, his salvation. For everything, he said simply. Maggie smiled. For showing me it's never too late. They stood together, watching the snow fall. Two people who'd been strangers 9 months ago. Two people who'd saved each other's lives. The ranch was quiet, peaceful. Home. October 15th, 2019. 1 year after the blizzard. That evening, the three of them gathered in the living room. Fire crackling, wind howling softly outside. Rosie was knitting. Maggie was reading. Jake was carving a piece of wood. A gift for Beatrice. A bird. Eva had loved birds. Maggie looked up from her book. You know what today is? She asked. October 15, Jake said. Wipe to him. 1 year ago today I found you in the snow. Dragged you out of that blizzard. Jake smiled. Best day of my life. Mine too, Maggie said. Mine three, Rosie added. They stood together. Three people who had found each other against impossible odds. Three people who'd learned that family is choice. That home is where love lives. That second chances are real. To second chances, Maggie said, raising her coffee cup. To family, Rosie added. To home, Jake finished. They touched cups, drank. The Montana sun had set hours ago, but inside the Callahan Ranch, warmth filled every corner. Maggie looked at Jake, at the cross around his neck, at the man who'd crashed into her life and changed everything. Jake, she said. Yeah, I'm glad you crashed outside my house, Jake laughed. That's still a strange thing to say. Maybe, but it's true. Rosie smiled. Me too. I'm glad for that blizzard, for bringing us all together. They sat in comfortable silence. The fire crackled. The wind whispered outside. Jake thought about the scared 5-year-old he'd been, about Eva's kindness, about Connor's love, about the road that led here. Every wrong turn, every hard mile, every moment of doubt, all of it necessary, all of it leading to this room, these people, this piece. He looked at the photo on the mantle, the one they'd taken in spring. 3 people, 3 smiles, 1 family. Maggie caught him looking. What are you thinking? She asked. That I spent 23 years looking for something, Jake said, and I didn't even know what it was until I found it. And what was it? Rosie asked. Jake smiled. Home. The fire popped. Sparks danced up the chimney. Outside, the first snow of the season fell gently on the Montana plains. Inside, 3 hearts beat as one. Saved by a blizzard. Bound by choice. Home at last. Maggie stood, walked to the window, looked out at the snow. You know, she said, a year ago I was standing at this window, wondering if I should go out in that storm, wondering if it was just the wind. She turned back to Jake and Rosie, tears in her eyes. And I almost didn't. I almost stayed inside. She couldn't finish. Jake stood, walked to her, put his hand on her shoulder. But you didn't, he said. You went out. You saved my life. And in doing that, you saved your own. Maggie nodded, smiled through her tears. I can't leave him, she whispered. That's what I said that night. I can't leave him. And I'm glad you didn't, Jake said. Rosie joined them at the window, put her arms around both of them. We're all glad, she said. They stood there, 3 people, 1 family, watching the snow fall, the same snow that had nearly killed Jake a year ago, the same snow that had brought them together. But now it was just snow, beautiful, peaceful, a blanket covering the world, not a threat, just a reminder of how far they'd come, of how much they'd found, of how love can bloom even in the coldest places. The wind whispered through the trees, soft, gentle. Welcome home. The Montana sun would rise tomorrow, promising another day, another chance, another moment of grace. And on the Callahan Ranch, 3 hearts would beat as one, saved by love, bound by choice, home at last.